Today we're talking about family. Chapter 7 of Manhood Restores. It reminds us that being a man isn't just about providing. It's about leading, loving, and setting direction at home. Husbands are called to serve their wives like Christ served the church. Fathers are called to shape their children's aim, not just let them drift. Older men should model integrity. Younger men should practice self-control. Family isn't where we relax our standards. It's where our leadership gets tested first. Boy, tell me about it. Getting tested right now. Everybody doing all right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Doing good.
Good. So as we continue through the journey of this book, Manhood Restored, we've reached week 7, chapter 7. And as we talk about family and leadership, what does it mean, especially in today's culture, for a man to prepare for marriage? Not just practically, but spiritually.
I think in preparing for marriage, it's um, understanding that that is a season of life that you need to be prepared for financially, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because it is a season of life that it's you preparing to be for the needs of someone else, and then ultimately, your kids, so your wife, then your children, the dog if you have a dog, the cat if you got a cat. I mean, it's just really not about you anymore. And I think, the United States of America, living where we live, a lot of times people are maturing for selfish motivations and selfish reasons. I get my money, I get my stuff. It's all about me, me, me. But to prepare, God's way is to prepare to live outside of yourself. And I also think that there are aspects of manhood that you don't attain until you become a husband and father.
Yep, I agree with that. There's a level of responsibility that you can't get, being single. But let me ask you this question. So when I asked the question about preparing for marriage in this culture, how was it different, right? 4 generations ago when they were
Oh,
getting married at 16 and 17. So were men getting prepared, or was the raising different in how they were prepared? Right? You understand what I'm saying?
yeah. I mean, I do. I'll start off and jump into it. I think if you go back 50, 60 years ago, marriage was woven into the fabric of the United States in terms of how, the family is where you created kids, where you created the workers for your farms, the workers for your home. Like, the family was so integral into the family construct. The construct really, the family was the construct. If you didn't have a family, you didn't have anything, really. You didn't, it's kind of like when you see in the wild, it's very abnormal to see lions who are by themselves. They're called wanderers. They're called exiles. They're abnormal. The strong lion is the one that has the big harem, or the family, if you will. So the pride. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pride. So yeah, I think it was integral back then, but it's not so much now, because in the 80s, when it was all about money in Wall Street, it really kind of brought in. Oh, I'll say this: in the late 70s, when the movie Kramer versus Kramer came out, that was the first movie that popularized divorce. And that's really when you started to see the fabric of the family in the United States of America tend to go down.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's interesting too, because today teens and young adults are in what we call a prolonged adolescence period. So the longer they have at home, right? They've got options to always come back home. Maybe I don't want to go off to college. Maybe I don't want to get a job. And so these kids nowadays live in what we call a prolonged adolescence. And so they're not getting prepared. They're not even attempting to get prepared. They're not even thinking about marriage. Matter of fact,
Yep.
there are some studies that show, teenagers today don't even want to drive. Like when we were growing up, we had a desire to drive. Like, I want to drive. I want to get in the car. I'm going to go hang out with my kids, my friends. I mean, but now they don't. They just want to be Ubered around. Anybody else? What are your thoughts?
In this day and age, there's a finding yourself, who is God called me to be. You have to know somewhat of the answer to that, I believe, before you can enter into a marriage relationship successfully. And so I think that's one of the big prerequisites nowadays. I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying about, the prolonged adolescence. Back then, kids had to come up to a higher level of maturity. It was built around life was built around work and doing things. Now it's built around enjoyment and having fun. Um, and so you're right. They take on responsibility oftentimes later in life, and we've seen that enjoying that phase and kind of stagnating in some cases.
No, that's real. But Elton, I want to, play the devil's advocate here just to ask the question. So when our great grandfathers got married, right? Did they know who they were? Or was it just a societal thing that, you know, I work, I get married, I buy a home, I start a family. So
Right.
why is it a bigger, requirement that we know who we are today versus when they got married 70, 80 years ago?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's so much more messaging out there today. There was some research that kind of talked about how many messages people are exposed to now compared to, ago. And it's like it's a factor of like 10 to I mean 10 plus to 30 compared, so we're just exposed to so many more things that are drawing us in different directions. Whereas, life was a little bit simpler.
Simpler.
You
Yeah.
didn't have as many, you didn't have these social media outlets and images as much when they were growing up. And so you had fewer paths. There was always, now it's a path they could find that was wrong, but the number and the sheer volume, I think, was much less. And so it was easier, I think, to find the path. You really, in today's day and age, you really have to intentionally focus in order to stay down the right path, in order to say God. Whereas, um, I don't know if you really had to put quite as much effort. I'm not saying it wasn't hard back in the day and there weren't challenges, but I think the nature of the beast is a little different now.
Yeah. Yeah. I would wholeheartedly agree with you, right? Kids, I was looking at this study today and it was talking about, what this generation of teenagers and kids and young adults want to be. And the very first thing was influencer, YouTuber, TikToker, right?
Wow.
And so in our great grandparents' days, it was let me go and start this farm so that I can build a family around that. But now we have so many different opportunities that we could, jump into. It kind of, if you're not grounded well, forces you, to choose other roads for a long period of time before you ever desire or want to settle down.
Yeah, we know too much to comprehend anything.
Boy, say that again, Derek. Say that.
Know too much. Know too much to comprehend anything.
Hmm. So, Derek, you had said something a little bit earlier as it relates to, preparing for marriage. Can you go back and jump back in that for us?
Yeah, I was just saying in many generations past, it was it was it was your purpose in life was to carry on the family name
Yeah.
and to make a legacy for yourself, and that was the purpose. You weren't even seen right in society if you weren't doing that. Uh, and so it's been watered down and watered down. Like I said, we have too many choices, too many things going on to really focus. And like Elton said, we have to be intentional. We have to be intentional about the things that we desire, the path that we want to take, and how we want to take that path. And and also who we believe in, who we belong to. We would just have to be intentional about that. It's just too many things now.
So how do we then raise children, or how do we mentor people, right? That leads to this type of preparation versus everything that we just mentioned.
I think it goes back to what Elton talked about being intentional. I think when you teach you raise your kids in the fear and admonition of the Lord, right? In the fear of the Lord and the admonition of him, admonishing him in everything that we do. And um I think that establishes a standard. What the impact my grandmother had on me was that she referenced God for everything. He was she looked at life through Christ colored lenses. Like everything was based on the lens of Christ. Will this honor the Lord? Will this please the Lord? And what we got a generation, they don't consider that. So they're considering what feels good, and that's where that whole prolonged adolescence is I'm going to delay the taking on the responsibility. But what's scarier about it even now is there are consequences to the powerful mechanism of sexual relation. When you talk about children out of wedlock, you're talking about disease. I don't know if y'all are hearing in the news, but Atlanta, Houston, leading the country, Washington, D.C., in terms of HIV cases, new HIV cases. So it's impactful, when you play around with companionship. If you have Satan's always about the counterfeit. The counterfeit relationship is premarital or sex outside of marriage, out of the context of marriage. So, and it's destructive because you have a lot of kids born who don't have the attention to detail that we as fathers are to take. I'm supposed to see my daughter. Oh, she's been talking about this. I'll go and talk to her, pray with her, with my wife later on, or my son, or get the kids together. We have a family conversation about something that occurred, and we're just meticulously walking with them through the ups and downs of the vicissitudes of life.
You know, with the vicissitude.
Well,
Hey, that's a good word, man. That's
I was trying not to laugh. It's just that we done heard it. You know what I'm saying? So,
Oh man, that's so good. Yeah, man, it just, you know, I've heard I've heard several grandparents and great grandparents say, "Man, I wouldn't want to be y'all.
oh my God.
Want to be y'all parents." One, because of all the activities, all the sports, everything that everybody's involved in, and two, just the world that we live in. It's just not as simple. I was talking to a parent the other day, and we were talking about cell phones, right? Cell phone is the way they communicate. Well, I was born in '79, grew up in the '80s. The way we communicated was bicycles.
Oh
We
yeah.
would know where everybody was based on where all the bicycles were parked, and it was a different level of communication and play and commitment, uh, in just the way that we hung out and spent time together. So this generation is just, a lot different. Sacrificial love. So how do we practically demonstrate that in marriage? You know, when you've got financial and emotional needs that pull us in all different directions, how do we practically demonstrate sacrificial love when everything else is going on?
well, there's no way to demonstrate it without doing it. Um, you That's one thing. There's a lot of things you can fake, but you can't fake sacrifice. In order to demonstrate sacrifice, you're going to have to actually give up something. And we think about when we maybe became parents or got married. There were certain activities that we did that we didn't all of a sudden we didn't have time to do as much anymore. We had to sacrifice those things because if we didn't, then our family won't get enough of us in order to sustain themselves. And so hopefully, and so many times, kids right now, they may not see all the sacrifices, but then when they start to mature, and even as that's one thing that has been very rewarding as my kids have started to mature, they start to notice and understand more about it and more about sometimes what you had to give up in order to for them to live in some cases.
Yeah. Unfortunately, boy, with hindsight being 2020, in those moments, they don't see that. They don't really understand, the cost of that sacrifice. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Because I remember days where my mom would get home from work where she may have walked and then she would walk to another job. Or in the morning time, she would ride the bus with me and my brothers to the job at my elementary school where she was the janitor. And so in those moments, I would be embarrassed because, man, my mom is getting on the bus with me and all my friends on the bus. Or people would see my mom walking in the rain. And as a youngster, I did not understand those sacrifices in what she was doing because, one, we didn't even have much. So to see that, man, mom is doing all of this and we still didn't have much. So it was very, when it comes to sacrifice, especially in the eyes of kids or younger people, um, that tends to be in hindsight when they can recognize the sacrifice and it begins to mean something to them.
Yeah.
And I think you have to manufacture it, especially because our kids live better than most of the kids in the world. So their perspective on struggle and their perspective on sacrifice
Oh,
is
yeah.
different.
Yes, sir.
So like, and we've had to be very honest with ourselves about, because I've seen a lot of suburban kids that grow up, especially when you consider where a lot of us grew up. A lot of us grew up in the country, where there wasn't a whole lot.
Yeah.
You from Arkansas, you're from Louisiana, Steve, me from Arkansas, Derek, you were in the city, but well, you were in Killeen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Army brat,
yeah, Army brat. Yeah, but you're kind of like, we grew up where, it was about scarcity. It was about, I know that was for me, it was about, and I didn't even know, I didn't know anything if different. I shared a testimony when I was preaching Sunday about going to the zoo, but I remember one year I didn't go to the zoo because my grandmother didn't have $5 for me to go. It was $5, $5. And she said, you can't go. And I remember standing there watching all the kids get on the bus to go to the zoo. And whew, it's still hard for me. I remember that. That was hard. Everybody got to go to the zoo because my mom had to send money from Dallas, but he couldn't get to Arkansas in time for me to go.
Yeah.
And I couldn't go. But when I look back on that stuff, like I'm thankful that there were things that I couldn't do that everybody else got to do because it gave me a thirst and a hunger. And my wife was the same way. My wife couldn't go everywhere. Her dad was really strict, and so we see in our kids like, man, they don't know a lot. So we have to manufacture, knows for them to understand like, hey, you're going to have to work for some things, So I think to your point, sacrifice has to sometimes be manufactured for our kids to see. But I think sacrificial love to our wives, now that's a whole different, Lord. I've noticed over the years, my wife has always scrutinized the things that I love,
Like, give me an example.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, like the cow, like when my wife figured out that I was a huge Cowboys fan, that was or things that I just like to do. Like she would notice those things and just notice it, And I'm like, oh, it's not above you, but a woman wants to know that she's first, I used to go to the movies a lot, and that's not something particular she enjoys to do. Now, like that's one of my favorite things to do. So I don't go anywhere.
Yeah. Circular words. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a relaxing thing. I love going to the movies, but that's not one of her favorite things to do. So I've learned to sacrifice that for the benefit of the things that she likes to do. So that type of love, I mean, I've had to learn a lot about that, through the process of being married.
Derek, what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, talking about the sacrifice, being an Army brat and living in a military base and knowing that the main job of everybody there is to die for us. It's kind of like it's a thing that we realized a lot was being sacrificed. But then when you're like your dad or somebody comes home from a day at work in the military and they're tired, and then they still got time to play some ball with you or something like that, or then you can really see that sacrifice. But and like my kids, my kid, he doesn't know anything about what the military does. He don't really know, but what we do is just being with him. So it's hard to, it's hard. I like what Courtney said about manufacturing. You have to put it in place. We're trying to teach him how to do chores right now, and trying to teach him how to iron. He's like, I'm missing my show. Like I need to go watch my show. Like, why I gotta do this, And I'm like, can you hear yourself? But he doesn't. It's just like, he just got it like that. But and so it gets hard. And you don't want to be mean. You don't want to take things away from him. But at the same time, it's like, where does your priorities lie? It's hard to see. It's hard to see at their age.
Right. And I mean, then, but if you don't take things from him and he's not used to know, they become entitled,
Mm-hmm.
And then speaking of sacrifice, right? Our kids can sit up and watch the Cosby Show and skip through the theme song. Whereas I had to wait every Thursday night to be able to watch it. So talking about sacrifice, they don't even have to wait, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're on season
Infomercial.
of The Fresh Prince, right? They get to skip. I'm just like, wait a minute. I had to wait a week at a time. So yeah, this generation.
And you didn't get to rewatch it.
And you didn't. If you missed it.
Some people had a VCR, but you didn't get to rewatch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything's on demand.
Everything. And they watch it on demand too, boy. So speaking of those things, right? The lack of sacrifice can lead to entitlement. And I know we're talking about the kids, but entitlement in marriage. What are some modern cultural pressures that foster that, right? Entitlement in marriage. And how do we resist them as Christ-centered men?
Ooh.
What are some modern cultural pressures that foster entitlement in marriage? And how do we resist them as Christ-centered men? All right, y'all on the spot now.
One of the main ones I think about is, when men attain a level of success, they do start to feel a little bit entitled sometimes. I'm entitled to, have my be able to watch the game in peace and quiet, or I'm entitled to, whatever it may be. And so I think in order to fight against that, we have to, kind of go back to what you're talking about before. We have to practice selflessness. I tell my kids, it's like, you don't deny yourself from the big things unless you practice denying yourself for the small things. So just things like, oh man, okay, I grabbed some food. No, take a minute, wait till everybody else sit down before you start eating your food. Let's start with the small things, and make it a lifestyle, a practice of denying yourself. We know that the flesh and spirit, they're going to war against one another.
Yeah.
Our flesh is going to want what it wants, and we're not going to be able to let the spirit the spirit's not going to be able to win unless we've trained it when it comes time to that. And so I think that is a big challenge. That entitlement is partly about wanting to retain self above and fighting against that selflessness.
Is there anything else in our culture today that maybe pressures you to feel some sort of entitled way when it comes to marriage?
I mean, some of the same things we talk about. We see the same images that our kids see in a lot of cases. We all have a desire, for success, and so we see other successful people. We see and we have an image of what it means to be successful. And so we're fighting against oftentimes a worldly image of success rather than a godly image of a success, which is success is when my family's thriving, not when I'm relaxing.
Right.
Woo. Yeah, what Elton said, that's deep right there. I mean, because it's the whole thought of when I come home and even though I'm tired, I can't shut it down because even, because she's been going all day. So I have to take a moment and then figure out, okay, how can I be a part of what's going on here? How can I be, whether that's dinner, whether that's homework, how can I be a part of that? And, that's a big deal because sometimes you can be wrapped up in your own world or your success, or I'm tired from work today. It's been a long day, but it was a long day for her as well. So you certainly have to think about that. One of the things that also I had to talk to one of my kids about the other day was boundaries, respecting the boundaries of, I have a child which will remain nameless that everybody's stuff, they just feel like it's theirs too. And they'll just come get clothes and come get food. You'll have drinks and they'll just open drinks. And I had to sit down with this child and say, hey, I need to talk to you about boundaries. I need to talk to you about boundaries, like, because in your life, there are boundaries, like respecting other people. And Elton made me think about that when he was saying that. And I had to sit down and say, you're going to live your life around people. And if you don't have a healthy understanding of boundaries, it could affect your relationships. It can affect your friendships, your engagements, your professional life. You can't just roll up, it's people on your job that'll just eat your lunch. It's in the refrigerator. It's people that'll do it,
Right.
And you're like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you eating somebody's lunch, So it's things as simple as that, and kind of helping, understand. And I think husbands absolutely have to understand boundaries. We have to understand boundaries when it comes to our wives, other men's wives. I mean, single women, how we come across, like, we definitely have to be respectful and honorable to honor the Lord, honor our wives, and do those things as well.
Yeah, I think, as you kind of think about this modern culture, it often tells us that in marriage, it's about what I can get. And it's all about me, my happiness, right? All the sex I want, you know what I'm saying? Or everything that benefits me. And even when you think about social media and the highlight reels, they constantly make people feel entitled or compared. I should be getting this. I should be getting that. And everything in this marriage is about me. And if you dig into that long enough, and if you scroll long enough, man, it begins to create an appetite in you that what you already have is not satisfying.
Hmm.
And it's really a dangerous, dangerous place to be, man. So I just think, just from a Christ-centered perspective, man, we literally have to remain grounded in Christ. We have to understand our purpose in Him. What have we been called to in marriage? Right? I mean, I know, as difficult as it sounds, man, manhood is hard. And, loving your wife like Christ loved the church, even unto death, is hard.
Yes, sir.
And unfortunately, as men, we really don't get a pass. We don't get a pass. And so, staying rooted in what God has called us to, understanding our purpose, understanding our role as husband, as father, is so important. And I often have to push myself back to that as just a reminder. Love your wife as Christ loved the church. Well, what does that love look like? It's sacrificial. And those are some of the things that keeps me grounded from feeling so entitled. And at Courtney, we talk about this often. One of our friends, it was Travis, actually. I think you referred to it as D-Mass. But he said sometimes, man, being married, is like, man, am I getting punked? Like I'm literally sacrificing everything all the time.
I think that was D Mass. I thought that was D Mass that said
It was
that.
Travis. It was Travis. But we argue about
feel
that,
like that, though. I feel like it.
But it was
Peace and truth.
yeah, and it's just a level of, like you don't get off the hook
No.
in marriage. And when God, was in the garden with Adam and Eve did what she did, he did not call her.
He said, Adam, where are you?
I'm calling you, even if you ain't responsible, even if it's not your fault. And so just being reminded of that is really what helps me to remember, man, God, you have a big purpose for my life, right? My children are watching me. My wife is watching me and the world is watching me. And as hard as it is, man, sometimes I just have to remember, keep going. It is my job, to present her literally without a spot or wrinkle. And that's just, it's a heavy load. It's a big job to carry. And I know we all do it with honor and pride. And I know we do it and we love it, but it doesn't mean it's any easier because we do it and we love it.
Yes, sir. And I'm reminded of a Bible study that I did once, and the Bible study said, "Hey, we focus a lot on Christ's resurrection and His glory." He says, really want to identify with Christ, you need to dwell on the cross and on His sufferings. And when Paul talks about that, when he talks about really knowing Christ, was knowing Him and how He handled the cross and the challenges of the cross, and how He did it with dignity, how He did it with bravery, and how He did it with dedication to His calling. So that's one thing that kind of comes to mind when you're talking, is that when we're meditating and we're seeking strength from Christ, we draw strength from His overcoming the cross, and that really shows us that we can do all things and can handle all things that come at us in this marriage.
Yeah, that's good, man. It the job of a husband and a father reminds me of an experience I just had with my brother-in-law, Garrett. And it really wasn't my experience. It was something that he told me. So over a year ago, he tore his pec while he was playing with the Tennessee Titans. And he was basically put on injured reserve for over a year. Well, after that pec healed, he gets up every morning, 4 or 5 o'clock, and he practices as if he's active on a team every single morning, day in, day out, winter, spring, summer. This year he gets a call and he goes to Denver Broncos, which is where he's playing today. One of the general managers, came down and said to him, I have never seen a player come out of the offseason so ready, so prepared. How did you keep your body in this type of shape? And Garrett basically said, I had to stay ready so I didn't have to get ready. And his point was, every day I'm training for what I've been called to do. And what I've been called to do is be an NFL linebacker. And just, dude, all of that just resonated with me. What have we been called? What are we training for every single day? And there's a man, there's a son, there's somebody out there watching to say, Courtney, oh my God, how do you do this? How do you stay in that type of spiritual shape? And people are going to be blown away by our commitment to what we've been called to do based on what they see. And it's a big job. And bro, listen, it's hard. Can you imagine getting up, working out at 5 o'clock in the morning on an NFL type routine and never really taking a break? That's what our role is like.
But he was doing this when he wasn't on the team.
Wasn't even on a team.
Yeah.
But he knew what the goal was.
That.
So anyway, I'm just blown away by, the sacrifice and what it takes, Courtney, to be a good husband, to be a good present father. Not perfect. But what does it take to do this job, man? And it takes work, bro. So how do you guys balance being present for your family, right? Emotionally, spiritually, and financially, even when the work demands are super high? Just balancing being present in every facet, even while the demand for work is super high.
Well, I think I have a wife and a son, and I take on something personal with each of them that we can keep an ongoing communication about. With my son, it could be anything from school to something he's playing, and we also do a scripture a week where we're going over it, and so we have these certain things that we talk about on a constant basis. So I'm keeping a channel between us, and then with my wife, it could be anything from the work that she's doing or the problems she's dealing with, and then whatever we're trying to get together for the house. And I intentionally have those conversations so that we, which will bleed into other things to keep us in tune with each other. And, and sometimes, because, sometimes I just want to come home and be quiet. I just want to sit still. I want to watch a little news and just kind of drift off. But I know I can't. I can't do that. I got to keep my head in the game, basically. So.
And I think it's important to kind of keep in mind, how rewarding this really is as well. And, think for me, I was not one of those kids that really visualized having a family when I was a kid. I talk to my kids now, and I know at least my oldest Ernest is really anticipating having a family. That wasn't me when I was growing up. I was not really into trying to pursue a family, and so I'm just so grateful at this place because it is more than I ever would have expected. It is more rewarding and more fulfilling than I ever would have expected to be able to to worship and serve God in this way through being a husband and leading a family. It's a greater calling than I never would have imagined.
Yeah, that's good, man.
And Elton, your son is like that because of you, and it's like you just put a battery in him of an imprint of you, and that's why he does the things that he does. He's really awesome.
Yeah. And Elton, wow, that is honorable. There are some men who are listening to this podcast where it's very difficult for them to separate those things, right? Work, family, finances, emotions, spirituality, all those different things. And so thank you for sharing that, man, because there are just some people who cannot balance. They cannot balance, man, and they feel stuck and they don't know what to do. So thank you for giving some voice to that. Courtney, what are your thoughts?
Now, I think that the value of marriage and the value of becoming a husband has been skewed in our society. And I think being a husband and a father has been served a raw deal. We've heard the negative, examples probably more often than the positive ones. If you couple that in a society where, feminism has had a huge effect on our society, you couple that with now boys not knowing their purpose and understanding like who and whose they are and what they were intended for. And you got a lot of confusion But the beauty of being a husband is, what I saw in myself and what I see in men is it's almost like you're a transformer where there are levels of your manhood and you don't even attain until you become a husband. And then when you become a father, you transform to something else. And it's always been in you. I'll give you an example. Um, the first baby that I ever changed diaper was Blair, my son. I never changed anybody else's diaper, but the first kid I ever changed was my son, then my girls, then I changed my girls. You know, um, so after having kids, when I would see something happen to somebody else's kids, man, I get teary-eyed. I get emotional about something happening to somebody else's kids. That never happened to me before I had kids. I never got emotional like that. I felt bad about situations, but I never got emotional because I can empathize. Because now the love I have for my children, I'm like, you know, like, what did Prince say? I will you, Father, if you want me to, it's fine. It's like, you live that, you think that kind of way, and it's sacrifice at a whole nother level, and then with your wife, when you really step in to empathize and to be there with her as much as you can, because with a woman, she thinks differently, but it's a beautiful thing when you're right. When y'all know the times every now and then when you're flowing with your wife, and it's a beautiful thing, where the sacrifice, she sees it and she acknowledges it, and y'all are in a good place, and that's a beautiful thing. But and I think sometimes it takes time to get there, and unfortunately we live in this time now where people are so used to quitting things. They quit jobs, they quit projects, and they quit on people, and we don't serve a savior that function that way,
But you know why they quit? Because they all have backup plans.
Yeah.
I can always go back home. And I was talking to a good childhood friend today, and we were having this conversation, and there were guys in my neighborhood who would never leave the comfort of their parents' home.
No.
Because they knew that to go out and to get an apartment, to go out and get a job would mean that I am now responsible. Right. And so I'll never forget when I graduated and I moved out of my mom's house, I never lived there again.
That's right.
I never lived with her again. So I went out and I figured it out, even the things I didn't even know. But there's a number of young men in our society who are just saying, bro, if I step out on that limb, there's going to be no one to catch me. So therefore, I will play it safe and I will risk nothing. And therefore, in my mind, if you risk nothing, you haven't lived.
But here's the thing where all the men listening need to know.
Say that.
But when you know Christ is your Savior and your Lord, my prayer always to the Lord is, God, I can't cover my family if you don't cover me.
Mm-hmm.
And the beautiful thing is, who covers me is Jehovah Jireh, the Lord our provider. Jehovah Shalom, the Lord my peace. Jehovah Shammah, the Lord who's present. Jehovah Rapha, the Lord my healer. Jehovah, like everything that he is, I have access to it.
Mm-hmm.
And you have access to it. So what those men have to understand is, it's not about, the burden is not on me to be the truth. Jesus said, my yoke is easy and my burden is light, meaning that you don't go through life by yourself. He's like, when you're yoked up to me and connected with me, I carry the brunt of the weight.
Right.
That's the beautiful thing about Christ. Delaria, we know a guy that, you know who I'm talking about. Ever since we've been married, he'll be like, man, I couldn't do what y'all did, but secretly he wanted to do it.
Yeah.
But every time he sees us, he's like, man, y'all sure look good. And you and I know that he denied himself of experiencing the most of what God had for him. And I would hate that there would be young men who miss out on seeing God come through, because for every challenge we've had, I can tell you God has always come through. Now the challenges are there, because just like whoever talked about the suffering, yeah, you learn a lot in suffering, but it's not all just suffering. I think sometimes we can over focus on the sufferings. Absolutely. but we also reign with Christ as well in victory. And we see him, we reign with him in victory. You know, yeah, there's suffering, there's challenge, but that's just to keep us on our knees and keep us focused on who the Lord really is.
Right. And in that suffering is where we learn, right? You don't lose in suffering. You only lose when you quit. That's the good thing about it. If you never quit, you learn and you grow. So there's a benefit on both ends, unless you quit. We can literally go ahead. Go ahead.
We're gonna get the shout. Derek about to get the running on here.
I was about to go into a Shirley Caesar song, that goat in the hole.
I said under your feet. Under your feet.
Go ahead, E.
I didn't say that old, but for the guys that look at it and say it's overwhelming, they're right. It is overwhelming.
That's right.
But that's where we get to the place where it's God's strength that works within us, and we have to rely on Him in our moments of weakness, when we can't figure it out, when we too tired, when we don't have the patience. That's where God wants us to be, because the Bible says His strength is made perfect in those weakness that we let Him work through us.
Yeah. And Cody, I have to go back to what you said. Like if that doesn't lighten your load, to know that the burden ain't on you.
That's right.
I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna go to work every day, but Lord, the burden's on you.
That's right.
No, you did it right.
That's right.
It was on you to heal. The burden's on you to lead.
Sure.
The burden's on you to help develop me, prepare me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Life on me, train me. The burden is on you. And so, bro, yeah, dude, listen, I can take that and run off of it for a week. That's just like 97 octane.
Indeed, let me tell you something. Let me tell you how much I'm gonna tell you how much we can count on him. He said, "Heaven and earth will pass away, but not one jot or tittle of my word will ever pass away." Which means that the earth would have to cease to exist for him to fail.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't mean God is my genie in the bottle, but what that does mean, I can go to him for everything.
Yes, sir.
And I can lay the burdens and cares of my family, my wife, my children, myself on the throne. And he has everything that we need that pertains to what the scripture said, life and godliness.
Yeah.
He knows how for me to live life in a way where I can function in this world and then live in a way godly that I can honor him and glorify him. And the provision is coming from him. So that's why it's so important that men are in a good church that teaches the word of God.
Yeah.
And have fellowship with strong men and men of God and families that are going in the same direction.
Yeah.
Because that will help us to be efficient and effective.
And better men.
Better men.
With that being said, hey, fellas, y'all drop the mic 3 or 4 times a night. It's broke. Y'all listen to this episode, and we'll be with you next week.